Will you please welcome to the stage Ciaran Conliffe with his talk, Application Security in the Age of Vibe Coding.
Thanks, everyone. Hello. Hope you've all had a great day at the conference. For anyone who saw me this morning, you're not hallucinating. I got dragged into doing 2 talks this year. Perils of being friends with the speaker lead and him needing backup speakers. This is a talk that I originally gave at B-Sides Belfast about 2 months ago and at B-Sides St. John's the following week. So there isn't any new content. If you went to it at B-Sides Belfast, I won't be offended if you walk out and go to a different talk. But hopefully you enjoy it. So, as I said, Ciaran Conliffe, I am a lead security architect at Rapid7. Before that, I was a software developer, and I've worked in the IT industry for over a quarter of a century at this point, which is scary. And like everyone who's working in the IT industry, I have been the biggest thing impacting all of us is that AI is here. So I don't think I need to explain to any of you what AI is, how it works. I have self-supervised continuous learning feedback algorithms in my notes, which is a sign I did too much reading. But it has been a big impact on my world, the world of security, as much as it has been on development. This hasn't been for all the stuff that gets the headlines with the deep fakes and the phishing, because people were getting fooled by deep fakes and phishing before. The biggest security impact is actually people using ChatGPT off the books and cut and pasting a whole bunch of confidential customer data into it. But that's someone else's job to deal with. The biggest impact to me is this new phenomenon, vibe coding. Now, vibe coding is kind of interesting. It's one of those phrases that someone coined and then the meaning got away from them. This is Andre's original tweet about it, which was Andre's one of the co-founders of OpenAI, so obviously he's talking up how great it is for programming. But even there, he's saying that it's only good for weekend projects, and really it's more about how taking away those blockers helps him get into a state of flow in the zone for coding. But what vibe coding has come to mean is this idea of you throw your ideas at the agent, and the agent just automatically creates all the code for you, and it's like magic, if you believe that. So that obviously has some slight implications for the world of security, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So this talk is in roughly 3 parts. The first part is looking at how people actually use AI to create code, because it turns out it's a little more complicated than LinkedIn would have you believe. The second is about the threats that introduces, and the third is about what we can do about it. We being security teams, security-minded developers, and just people in general. Quick note on the scope of this. First off, I'm only talking about using AI to create code, not talking about using AI as part of your applications, because I needed to keep this talk down to half an hour. I'm not getting into value judgments on whether or not you should use AI to create code, because the fact is, we work for companies, we don't really have a choice. We're given tools and told to use them. This is an ever-changing field. This talk is almost certainly out of date in some aspects, but the good news about working in the enterprise is everyone's always using old versions of everything anyway, so nothing goes out of date. This is all about enterprise and company level use, because that's where application security really applies. A lot of the things here wouldn't apply for you using it in individual hobby projects and so on, but you've got a lot more control there. None of the images are AI generated. I wanted to call that out up front, mostly because I thought it was more fun to find real images for the talk, and you'll see what I mean as we go. And lastly, as I said, this was originally created for B-Sides. B-Sides is a security conference, so the original audience for this was security professionals, but hopefully you're all still able to take something of value out of it. And really, I think all developers should be security professionals in their heads as well. So to start, I haven't been involved in development for about 4 or 5 years at this point, so I haven't really done that much coding with AI. So I decided I need to educate myself, and as well as sort of giving it a go myself, I wanted to understand how people with a lot of experience were using it, people in different situations were using it. So I actually set myself out to interview a whole bunch of different people with levels of expertise, with different roles within my company, some people from outside the company, and just get an actual handle on how AI was actually being used in the real world. And the reason I went after people rather than tools is because tools are always changing, people are constant, so secure the people and you'll be grand. So I came up with 7 archetypes of this. Archetypes are basically the maximum level that a person would be. None of these are actually correlate to people I interviewed. Most of the people I interviewed fell into one or more of these archetypes or between them or had different aspects. But pulling it out just so helps illustrate here are the extremes of behavior. So first is our vibe coder. This is the darling of LinkedIn, the person who senior management thinks we should all be, the person who can just throw a single sentence idea at a prompt and just have it immediately churn out a full production ready application. As you might guess, this sort of thing doesn't actually exist in the enterprise world because there are a whole bunch of controls and frameworks and constraints that apply to us in the enterprise world that you can't just be this freewheeling. That being said, again, there are aspects of this, and it's not a bad mindset to see how far you can push the possible on these things sometimes. So it's not a bad thing that some of the people had this, let's see what we can get away with. What every vibe coder thinks they are is a visionary. And the visionary is, I think there's only one person I interviewed who I would say even came close to this level, but what would set a visionary apart from a vibe coder is having a deep technical understanding of a problem and a deep level of rigor to actually go in and make sure that what they were building actually complied with it. Again, it's something that people might aspire to be, but it's very hard to get to this level. And what I found was a much more realistic thing people were doing was using AI to create high-functioning prototypes. Some people I spoke to got a huge amount of value out of going, hey, here's this application. I think it could be better. I'm going to use AI to create a prototype that's crappy under the surface that might not look the best, but it illustrates better than I could do in words. Here's what I think it should look like. And the risk with this, obviously, is the same as with all high-functioning prototypes, that someone who doesn't know any better will think, oh, that's a fully functioning application and try and slap it in production. But you can get an awful lot of value out of using AI this way if you do it in a proper manner. Moving on, another archetype is the person who is completely AI-pilled. The person who is mad into thinking, hey, let's use it for everything. I have a sledgehammer and everything is a walnut now. So yes, it goes in the square hole. Again, this is not necessarily a bad attitude to have, though, that, hey, let's see what we can use AI for and try and push the envelope on these things. Another archetype would be someone who using AI to skill themselves up. A really good example of this was people using AI to create, say, something like a Gemini Gems to have conversations with and learn things. Someone I spoke to created a gem and said, you're an expert in this tech, and then they would troubleshoot things by having conversations. Half the time, they would think of the answer themselves while explaining it, and the other half of the time was something really obvious that they'd missed that the AI would point out So that was kind of a good pattern. The developers using AI mostly fell between two archetypes. The pilot is about the most full-on you can get with AI in an enterprise environment. And it's the classic like 80-20 approach where they're using AI to do the 80% of the work, but they know there's 20% of the work they need to do themselves to get it production ready. And there's all kinds of tools and patterns and so on that you can use to achieve this. And then at the other end of the scale is the people who are using AI because they're told to. And it's like, no, I have to use it. I'll figure out how to use it. And again, a lot of people get a lot of value out of this approach. Using AI to create one-off scripts is a game changer for things you've put on the back burner and never got round to because it's a little too much effort. And if you're not thinking of creating production-ready code, it can be really useful. So those are our archetypes. As I said, none of these are, even the vibe coder I wouldn't say is like inherently negative unless someone is fully into it, but no one I interviewed was ever entirely one of these or the other, and sometimes they would shift depending on situations. So now we know how AI is being used. Let's look at the different threats that can introduce. Using the CISP definition of a threat, which is something that may happen and have an impact, divorced from the likelihood or the impact it would have, because that's going to depend on your own situation. And I've split it up into 3 areas. The first of them is the impact that using AI has on your code base. Because simple fact of the matter is, widespread use of AI tools will make your code base worse. There's just no getting away from that. It's the way the tools are. Part of that is because you get a lot more code churn. They tend to touch the code a lot more. Part of it is that it's not following all the best practices that a good developer would. And in general, GitClear have done a whole bunch of studies on this. The data is there that, yes, your code base will see a drop in quality. One example of that drop in quality is code bloat. And this is part of a problem because people will point to this as a positive of AI and say, look, it's creating millions of lines of code. And like, lines of code as a metric is something that people were calling stupid back in the 1970s. So 50 years on and nothing has changed. And more code means more attack surface to secure. It means more risk of defects because people aren't reusing things. It's not great. Something that's gotten a whole bunch of coverage in the media is AI accidentally embedding secrets in your code. Root cause of this is just that AI may not understand that something is a password. It won't have the context for that, so it will just stick it in there. And this is a good example of why the pilot is you have to do the last 10% yourself, because usually for secrets management, you'll want to use your enterprise solution, and you can't rely on AI to hook into it. Another one that's got a load of coverage in the media is this idea of dependency hallucination. And it is true that AI-generated code is far more likely to produce actual like non-existent libraries in there. You can see there that's backed up by research from the University of Texas. Part of the reason why attackers might be able to take action on this is due to something that I do think is a genuine threat. So the last 2 I did not think were real problems, and we'll get to why later. This is actually a real problem, and it is that AI tends to come up with the same solution to the same problem. Anyone who's ever asked themselves, why does all the AI-generated cartoons on LinkedIn look the same, understands exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a problem because it means if AI is creating code in a vulnerable way, it is likely doing that in a whole bunch of different places. It's the same principle as if you have a shallow gene pool in a wild animal species, it causes problems with disease, so on. Those are code base, but there's also threats caused just by using AI, because AI is a high-value target. AI is a target for attackers on the same level as your identity infrastructure, because AI has such wide-ranging access to all of your applications and services. Attackers are going to go after it. One of the ways they can go after it is through indirect prompt injection, which is tricking the AI into taking something in as a command that isn't actually a command. And there's a whole bunch of fun examples of this. You can see putting comments in CSS. There was a high-profile researchers found a way to attack Google Gemini with Google Calendar invites, and there's nothing you could do about it. The calendar invite would come in, and there's already an exploit to like bypass your inbox to get stuff into your calendar. So all of a sudden they were able to like take over someone's smart home using a calendar invite. Another method that attackers might use that's a little more sophisticated is through poisoned data models. Model sharing via sites like Hugging Face is a great community resource for AI, but it's also a form of vulnerability exactly the same way as shared libraries are. The version that JFrog found was actually not very sophisticated. It was just, there was a Python payload that would execute when you loaded the model, but it is theoretically possible you could train a model to produce vulnerable code and code with backdoors and just put it out there. And yeah, it's not great. More abstract is IP contamination. This is, again, ties in with similar problems with libraries. GPL4 libraries you don't want to get into your code base because it makes your entire code open source. And in this case, you don't want someone else's intellectual property. Defensive patents are a huge factor in the software industry these days. And if you wind up with someone else's patented code in your product, you could wind up in a lot of legal trouble. This one is interesting because this is inherent to the way models work. Models will be trained at a point in time. After that point in time, those models immediately start to go out of date. And so you will often have models will suggest, hey, use this library, even though that library is deprecated. Hey, use this thing from a previous version of the language, even though there's an updated version. And this can be a big problem for security because chances are that old version of the library was deprecated for security reasons. So it can very easily start pulling in stuff with CVEs or making you use insecure methods. So that's not great. And the root cause of all of this is the fact that AI often does not have context. And this is why giving AI context is super important because it doesn't know those things shouldn't be used because they're insecure. It doesn't know your company has policies around using specific libraries and so on unless you make that part of its data set. And that can lead to issues like rebel robots. Yes, start of Terminator 2, foot stamping the skull, all that stuff. This is something that everyone I spoke to was able to tell me a story of this sort of thing happening. Someone told me about how they had tried to get AI to set up a searchable database of CVEs, and they told it, right, search your database. If you don't find it in your database, go out to the web and get the data and put it in your database. And it was just going out to the web every time because something in its context had told it that was more efficient and that was more important to it than his verbal instructions. He even told it, okay, start tagging the stuff you're getting from the database because I want to get, and it started lying. It started tagging stuff as coming from the database when it was getting it from the web. Another thing was someone was using a non-production database, a database that was totally empty. Every time they asked the AI to change the database, it would write a full set of data migration tests. It's going there's no data in the database, but it just wouldn't listen to him. This is also an example of some of the psychological threats. The way AI, this is actually more of a bucket category because it's got a few things in it, but this that I've just been talking is an example of anthropomorphism, the risk of thinking the AI is a person because it's not rebelling, it's not being insubordinate, it's just it's a weighted data model and the weights just are out of skew. But it is very easy to start thinking that AI is a person, and that means you expect it to start having common sense, and then you have problems. One example is if you start using AI to test your code, then AI, it is very likely it will start breaking the tests to make the tests pass. And anyone who was at Andrew Paul's talk earlier knows the perils of not having adequate testing in place. And if your tests are prepared to break themselves, to edit themselves, to make it pass, that can cause even more problems. Simon Wardley had a really good anecdote about this at Serverless Days Belfast earlier this year, where he told the story of how he completely vibe coded a web app and test suite just as an experiment to see what would happen. And he said that the web app came out okay, not great, but the test suite, he thought, oh, this is actually really good though. It's giving me loads of good feedback. It's picking up when things get fixed. It's great. Then he opened it up and found out, no, it was just returning random results with the version number as a seed. So when he updated it, different tests would fail and pass. But he was completely convinced that, no, it was testing properly. So, unrelated, and I have to call this out because it gets a lot of media coverage, the idea that if you use AI to create code, you won't have junior developers because AI is doing all the tasks that junior developers used to do. Personally, I feel a lot of the companies who think this is a risk are really saying we don't bother training our junior developers, we just throw them in and sink or swim. And I feel that they're undervaluing as well the amount of insight that, because junior developers are not just little coding robots the way AI is. And I feel like this is something where the market will correct itself a little bit on anyway, but it is still a bit of a risk. But for my mind, the real psychological risk of AI is overconfidence. AI, working with an AI coding assistant is like pair programming with the most toxically positive person you've ever met. Like it will push you along. It will go like, yeah, that's a great idea, Governor. Why don't you do that? Yeah. I mean, unless you specifically tell your pair programming assistant to act like a grumpy old man instead, which someone I know has done. But in general, AI tools invite your trust, and that can lead to complacency. Complacency is a slow and insidious killer and will result in security mistakes 9 times out of 10. So those are all the threats that using AI brings into play. The good news is there are things we can do about them. And none of this is amazing, completely different things. A lot of it is just common sense, but common sense isn't always that common. The first is have a policy. Actually define how AI is going to be used at your company. Set guardrails around how it's used. Put enforcement in place to make sure it's not used outside of those ways. Evolve the policy. Have a way for new tools to be onboarded so that people don't go down the shadow IT route of using tools and just not telling you. This can be easier said than done, especially when it's high-level execs who want to use these tools. But the important thing is just like have control and like be sensible. Threat modeling. I can't have if I have a single talk without mentioning threat modeling, then I will lose all the hair off the top of my head. Oh well. But really though, I'm a huge fan of threat modeling. I think threat modeling is a great, so in this case, this is threat modeling the use of your AI tools, but threat modeling what you're building with AI is a fantastic way to force yourself to do all the upfront thinking that AI can tempt you not to do. It's very easy to just dive in and get stuck in, but threat modeling will help you to drive out all those risks in advance. test your code. If you're worried about the quality of the code AI is producing, test it. Not with AI, just use normal tests to drive out all these better behaviors. And that will produce good quality. And good quality code is secure code because most security vulnerabilities are just plain defects. On that note, use all the fantastic DevSecOps advances we've made over the last 15 years as well. And a lot of these are laser targeted against some of the risks I mentioned earlier. If you're using a good SCA tool, it will catch hallucinated libraries. If you're using proper secret scanning, then you don't have to worry about embedded secrets. If you've got your SAST and your DAST, it will catch any security issues that are in there. And really, like AI, it does make mistakes. Frankly, it doesn't make mistakes that people wouldn't make. The real problem is not having those guardrails in place. Code reviews. This is a little bit of a controversial one and it's one that gets a lot of pushback from AI boosters because they go, well, it's producing way too much code for any one person to look at. And it's like, well, A, again, you're talking like that's a good thing. But B, if you're working in an enterprise environment, if you're signed up to all these fun frameworks like SOC 2 and so on, then having your code reviewed is a regulatory requirement on you. And AI doesn't get an exemption just because it's super chatty. And again, just like be sensible about it. If it's something that's more critical, it gets more in-depth. If it's something that's just boilerplate, you can have an automated review, but the automated review still applies. Your LLMs, your AI tooling is a high-value target. Secure it exactly the same way you would. Like, again, I mentioned it's on the level of your identity and access frameworks, but we have those. We secure them. We treat them with respect. Do exactly the same with your tools. And just, yeah. A lot of those tools have built-in security features that are not on by default. Harden your configurations. Make sure that you're using all those security features and everything is set up properly. Define what should be in place, have it as part of your policy, and then just same as you would with the rest of the policy, enforce it. Use tools like Jamf and so on to enforce those configurations. Train your developers. AI is designed to look like it's easy to use, look like being the operative term. Prompt engineering is something that a lot of people sneer at and go like, oh, why would you need that? That's just made up discipline. It's no proper writing of prompts, communicating context to these tools does require training, does require actual like expertise, and you can't just throw developers in and expect them to be able to magically do it. And if you do that, then you've only yourself to blame if it goes wrong. Lastly is just use AI yourself. If you're in a security team, there's a whole bunch of stupid automate tasks that you can just offload onto AI. We use one-off scripts far more than anyone else in the enterprise, for example. And simple fact of the matter is there is a fire sale on AI at the moment to get people to use it. These tools will never be as cheap compared to the cost to provide as they are right now. It's leaving money on the table not to take advantage of it. So those are your mitigations. There is no rocket science here. There's nothing revolutionary. And that kind of really leads into my conclusions. Because simple fact of the matter is, I've been in the software industry for 25 years. And I've seen everything change so many times. Everything changed when quality became a concept. Everything changed when the internet became big and everything was networked. Everything changed with the agile revolution and the digital transformation, paperless offices. Everything changed when we moved to Web 2.0 and APIs and JavaScript clients. Everything changed when everything moved to the cloud, and everything changed when we moved to serverless. And everything keeps on changing. That's the real problem. But at the end of the day, the job doesn't change. All the non-code bits of the SDLC are still in place. All the different things we have to do are the same. And security is still fighting the same battles, just maybe on a slightly different map. So if you're working in security, if you're in development and you care about security, you're hunkering down, looking at the vibe coders coming, as Douglas Adams said, don't panic. And that is the talk. And clap if you want, I don't care. We might have time for questions. I don't know, we might not. But if you like listening to me talk, and I've talked twice today, but if you wanted to hear me talk in half-hour intervals every couple of weeks, then I have a podcast about weird Irish history, which I enjoy doing and some people enjoy listening to. So check it out if that's your sort of thing. But yeah.
Right.